there is comfort in repetitive movement. A yogi would say, I am practicing yoga. Perfection is never the goal. The process and what we learn about ourselves along the way is what matters. Stitching is like that. We carefully select our fabric, choose just the right floss, and we gather our tools, the scissors and needles. Then we take a seat in our favorite chair and begin to stitch. The needle goes into the fabric and comes back out. It goes in and comes back out. Stitch by stitch, we make beauty and find comfort as we stitch. Hi, I'm Jackie. Welcome back to another episode of Comfort Stitching. This is my FlossTube where I talk about mostly cross-stitching, but some other things that might be going on in my life and other things related to my artistic journey. That's why I started this channel, and many of you seem to be enjoying it, so welcome back or welcome in if this is your first time here. I hope you enjoy what I share, and I hope you like and subscribe to the channel and share it with all your friends. So today, as I said, is episode 4. And those of you who have been with me before probably are noticing that I'm in a different location. This is my stitching chair. In the background is my art studio, where I do other types of artwork or crafts. I've always called it a studio because I've been a professional artist in my life, a commercial illustrator, and some other forms of art. So I've always had a studio. Some of you may have craft rooms. It's all the same. It's the place where we create. So here in my stitching chair, I'm here today because y'all have questions, like you always do. And some of what we're going to cover today is going to be, kind of the usual, what I'm working on, what my progress is. I have 2 things that I've been working on. I used to say I was a monogamous stitcher. Can I still say that if I have 2 things? I hope so. But I do predominantly work on one thing at a time with another one coming in here and there. So I've got some progress on that. And I've got my first Stitchy kindness this time to share. I do have a little bit of stash enhancement or haul, and then some plans. And oh gosh, let me tell you, today is July 27th, 2024. It is summertime, probably hot where you are. It's hot here in Northwest Missouri. The end of July is always the time of rapid growth and harvesting of gardens. We see a lot of people selling their sweet corn out of the back of their pickup trucks, people with zucchini the size of those pickup trucks, tomatoes, a lot of the good stuff that we love about summer. It is in the 90s, but this is pretty comfortable for her, so for that, I'm grateful. So today, like I said, we got project updates, a little bit of haul, and as has become customary, I will have a little bit of a mindfulness or meditation at the end of today's video. I've got, I think, a really lovely journal passage from Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, that I want to share with you today. And it ties into the time of year we're in. So I will let you know when that's going to happen. So if that's not your thing, I totally get it. You can either choose to leave or to stay for that. But a lot of people have seemed to enjoy the mindfulness meditation time that I've been including in my videos. So I hope you'll stay. I want to really start out with a huge thank you. Those of you who watched episode 3, my last episode, I took you on a tour of a wonderful shop that's here in the town of Weston, where I live, a shop called Florilegium. And so many of you loved that tour and contacted the owners. Some of you have actually come to town and visited the store, But the owners were so completely surprised at how many of you have reached out to them and purchased things, sent things to Australia. So they were just so pleased at the response and reception to their store. And I'm so glad that I got to share that and that you all now are aware of another amazing resource that we have as stitchers. When I started this channel, I had no idea how many people were going to watch. I think I've told you before, I would have been happy with if 10 people had watched it. I had no idea the amount of people who would watch and the amount of people who would subscribe. I started the channel just as kind of a chronicle, if you will, about my stitching journey, my art journey, the things that inspire me and influence what I'm doing and why. But I kind of crossed a milestone this week that I think is worthy of sharing and celebrating, actually. 7,525 of you as of this morning. It may be more now. I didn't look just before I got on here, but over 7,500 of you have actually hit the subscribe button. I'm astonished by that, truly astonished and so grateful. Grateful that so many of you have decided that what I have to share is valuable enough to you that you hit that subscribe button. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you again for that. And I talked to Gretchen, the owner of Flora Legium, because I want to do a giveaway. And I talked to Gretchen, and the two of us actually have a gift to share with one of you subscribers. So I'm going to do a giveaway. That's not something I ever thought I would really include in my videos. Don't expect it in the future, but I really thought that the milestone of 7,500 subscribers was certainly worthy of celebrating with a giveaway. So I talked to Gretchen, and one of the things that people were so excited about when they saw it in that video tour that I took you on was some velvet strawberry pin cushions. Now I included those purposely because I know stitchers like strawberries. And so what I've got for you, what I'm going to share with you, is a kit for some of the velvet strawberries. This is the kit. It has all the trimmings. So I have that for one subscriber. And not only that, but I have something that I made. I've mentioned before that in January, I went to Sampler Symposium that was put on by the Attic Needlework in Arizona. And I made something for my table mates and for some other floss tubers that I knew who would be there that I have come to feel like are my virtual table mates. And I made a little velvet acorn pincushion or needle holder with a wool little needle book that I embroidered on. And included in that needle book are my favorite needles. And I'll talk a bit more about those later, but I'm going to include in the giveaway that kit and this because I think you all are my virtual table mates now. So that's what I want to give away to one of the subscribers. So from what I understand from other floss tubers when you do a giveaway is that I'm gonna ask you to comment on this video. Hopefully your person has already liked. If you haven't, like and subscribe to my videos. And in your comments, put the word strawberry in your comment. And then before my next video, probably about 3 weeks down the road, I will do a random comment picker and choose a winner of that strawberry kit and the little velvet acorn and needlebook and needles. So thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming along on this journey of stitching with me and for appreciating what it is that I'm sharing with you. I know we have a lot of options with our floss tubes and other things that we choose to spend our time with and doing, and I truly appreciate that you have chosen to spend your time with me. So now with that said, one of the reasons I'm sitting in this chair today is because I've gotten a lot of questions about supplies. Many of you are really interested in the magnifying lamp that I use. I've had questions about the hoop that I use. Some of you follow me on Instagram, so you've seen pictures of that. What are the magnet things that I use? Somebody wanted to see my floss, so you're gonna see that today. And I'm gonna move the camera just a minute so you can see the setup that I have here today. So here we are, right next to me. There's what we're gonna be going through. So hopefully you will enjoy that today as well as what I'm stitching. So let's start out with some stitching, some updates on the two projects that I have going. You know, I have a sampler. I tend to stitch on samplers or things that are of a historic nature. Move that just a little bit more. And I'm going to start with a French alphabet sampler because I've got the other sampler I'm working on, Bridget Power, who you've all seen. I've got kind of some information and some updates on what I've found out about the history of that and what I haven't found out on the history of that. So I'm going to start out, first of all, with the French sampler today. And I've got a envelope that this came in. I'm going to pull some things out of it to show you. This sampler is one that is jam-packed full of alphabets. I know alphabets are not everybody's jam, but they are mine. So this is Antoinette, 1894 to 1896. And I need to put glasses on to read. I've got some notes here to give you some more information about that. This is from European Reproduction Samplers in Germany. And I will put information in the description box down below of how you can order that if that's something you might be interested in. I know some of you already have, which is cool. You've been sharing progress photos with me. Now, mine, I'm just working on the top left corner. This is obviously going to be a long-term project because of all those alphabets, but here's where I am. This is stitched on 56 count. This is my first time stitching on 56 count. The fabric is Shrekie's Tan from Needle Bling Design. It's a really very nice light tan, just a great sampler color. And the thread I'm using is Overa Soie 103 in the number 664. It seems like that's pretty much everybody's favorite red. So, and I did try some other reds on this fabric, but this one just was the one that worked the best. So I want to read to you just a little bit about the Antoinette sampler, because this is one that does have a little information that came along with it. The stitch count is 546 by 373, and the recommended linen was 36 count, but truly on 36 count with that stitch count, I'd had a bed sheet hanging on my wall. So that's one of the reasons I chose to work on 56 count, so I could fit it. Actually, this is a fat quarter. 56 count, the fat quarters come a little bit longer. They are the same width as other fat quarters, but I've got more length on this. But this is just a fat quarter, and the whole thing will fit on a fat quarter on 56 count. So this says, this is a wonderful memory of Antoinette, of her admirable effort. I've got a smaller version of this too. So yeah, that is definitely an admirable effort, right? Collecting a wide variety of alphabets, selecting, designing, and placing of larger and smaller motifs, and finally the 2-year-long stitching of the sampler, dated 8th of December, 1894 to 1896. The first album is dominant. It is number 106 of Saju. The letters are decorated with small roses and perspectively designed. On the left and on the right, it is flanked by 2 hearts, flaming hearts of Jesus and Mary. And I'm going to show you that again, because you can see I put one of those in already, and then there's another one at the other end. So the flaming symbols of love, Jesus and the Virgin Mary, with a crown of thorns and a rosary. There are 22 ABCs harmoniously changing their sizes and vibrations, and the sampler, with its corner and border motifs, has an almost airy effect in the eye of the beholder. This sampler is owned by Marie-Therese Saint-Aubin. The family, living in Alsace at the time, fled to France during the Franco-German War of 1870 to 1871. Her great-aunt, Antoinette Graf, attended an Italian monastery later. There is good reason to suppose that she made her sampler there at the school. I saw Antoinette's sampler at the exhibition stand of Marie-Therese Saint-Aubin on the something in 2013 in Paris. I'm not even going to attempt French. Some of you have heard me attempt French before. I don't speak French, so I'm not going to try this. But Sabine, the owner of European Reproduction Sampler, saw this in Paris in 2013 and was just mad about the wonderful work here. So she went back and forth again and again, admiring the hinted at flowers and insects. And at the very end, there were 2 samplers, this original piece that I've shown you, this one right here, and then this smaller reproduction variation that was made by a grandniece. So this one has just a little bit of some blue sprinkled in here and there. And I think I'm going to do a little bit of that in mine. So anyway, Sabine wants to thank Marie-Therese for her approval to take photos, and she's pleased to present Antoinette's souvenir to us for our stitching pleasure. So it's definitely been a pleasure for me. As I said, I've not done 56 count before. And if you were with me last time when we talked about how important it is that we choose the language that we use wisely, because if we think we can't, we can't. You're right, you can't. But if you think you can, you can. You could do this if you have the right tools. And so we're going to talk about tools today. But anyway, that's Antoinette, 1894 to 1899. And as I said, that came from Germany. It came in this plastic envelope with cardboard around it. It arrived completely, safely, and swiftly. So if you decide you might want to join me and stitch Antoinette, that's going to definitely be a long-term project for me because that's not going to be done overnight. But if you'd like to join me and stitch on Antoinette, I'd love to have you. Oh, I just saw something. I know somebody's going to ask about this because you've asked about a similar pillow that I have on my couch. This is something I got on Etsy probably 3 to 4 years ago. I'm thinking maybe closer to 5 because it was when I was first moving in to my apartment here. It's made from old rugs. So like I said, Etsy. And I think if you just look at the search bar on Etsy, if that's something you're interested in, you ought to be able to find something similar. It is from an antique rug, so you won't find the same thing, but hopefully something similar. Excuse me, I want to grab a drink. So now let's talk about Bridget Power. And I've got a lot here that I'm moving over from the chair of goodies because I have a lot of notes on this. So Bridget Power 1840 is a sampler chart from Gigi R. Let me show you. This is the cover. And this is the antique. And we've talked in the past, if you've been on my journey of Bridget with me, how when I first saw that cover, and I've seen that chart, I probably saw it in January at the attic, I would not have chosen to do this sampler based on this picture. Nothing against, I mean, it's a beautiful sampler. Obviously, I'm doing it now. But there wasn't enough about this picture, about the antique, that would have attracted me to pick up the chart. That's all I'm saying. It just wouldn't have attracted me to pick up the chart. But I saw a finish of it on Instagram. And when I saw the finish of it, it just came across my Instagram feed, probably from a hashtag that I follow. And I was just so struck by the stitcher's finish of Bridget Power that I immediately knew that I had to stitch it. And not only that I had to stitch it, but there was something about this stitcher's, the way that she chose to stitch it, the linen color she chose, that I wanted to do it in the exact same way. Combination of the lighting, the linen, the called for DMC floss, everything about it just said, you need to do this. And as I have now sat with Bridget since March, I started this in March, I had no idea the kind of journey that I would go on with Bridget. But first of all, let me show you my progress. And fold up my linen here. Because I have made progress. So here we are. Let's peek around here. I've got a window right to my left, so that's where the light's coming from today. I hope this works, yeah. And so last time I shared this, I had the basket of flowers done, and I had just the very top of that archway in with just a little bit of the words. So as you can see, I've definitely made some progress here. I finished the overwon words that go in the top of this arch and started with those draperies. And I'm starting to work my way down, getting a little bit more of the border into it. And that's Bridget Power 1840. So I'm using mostly the called for flosses. They are all DMC, with the exception for me of this one Gentle Art. And then I'm choosing to do my overwon words with a 103 in this purple number 527. So let me talk about why I changed up some colors. And actually I added another color in, a green, this dark green. And let me talk about that. So in these flowers, you can see there's a very dark green in there. It's up in there in the lily of the valley and in some of the border. And the called for color on that is 934, which is nearly black. There's 934. And I just felt like that contrast in the Lily of the Valley between the other green around it and the white of the flowers, that color right there just looked too dark to me. That contrast was just too much. So I just went one value lighter. I switched to 935. Pull them out. They're very similar. Oh, I got them too far apart on my ring. Very similar, but slightly different. 934 here, 935 here. And I am using 935 in some other areas of the chart, but I'm also using that 935. So just when it feels right to me, when the contrast just seems too stark, I've been switching it up. And now the other one that I switched to that gentle art color was a pink that is 326. It's showing really brilliantly here. It kind of looks red, but truly it is more pink. And with the color of the linen that I chose, which by the way is 40 count Up in the Attic by Fox and Rabbit. This color with that linen can tend to look almost fluorescent. Very much, if you have flowers that are fuchsia, this sometimes look really fuchsia on this fabric. So once again, I'm changing some colors, not in every area, because I have used this in some of the flowers and in some areas. But in other areas where it seemed like it was just too fluorescent, I have switched to the Gentle Art Schoolhouse Red. And I chose that because, if you can see here, they're pretty similar. This has those fuchsia undertones, but because this is an overdyed floss, it has some darker variegation in it. And it's just, it doesn't show on camera, but it's just ever so slightly darker. It has a little bit of black in it or brown in it that just takes the fluorescence of the DMC color just down a notch, so that that floss combined with this linen just works better. It just works better. And that's just the way my eyes see color. I know everybody sees things differently. Some people will just follow the chart. I have no idea if the stitcher that I saw in an Instagram changed any of the colors. She said in her post it was called for. She might have felt okay about her DMC flosses on this color. And that's the beauty of stitching, is that we all can do things in the way that works for us, the way that feels good to us. And then the other change I made, as I said, I am using a 103 silk on my 1/1 stitching. Now the called for that 1/1 stitching is DMC 3371, which y'all probably know is an extremely dark brown, nearly black. Mine, when I tried it, the over one stitching with the DMC, I just didn't like the way it looked. It looked too plump, it looked too fuzzy. I just wasn't happy with it. And I did try tent stitches. I prefer full crosses. So I was in kind of a dilemma. What do I do? So I do not have any of Soie Surfine silks. I have one little Tudor silk that I bought to play with to try on 56 count. And I only had the one, and I just thought, nah, and it's black. I didn't want stark black on this because there's no black anywhere else. There's this dark brown. So I pulled out this 103 that I have. I have some 103s from a couple of kits that I got at Sampler Symposium. And I pulled out this deep purple. There are some purple flosses that show up in this sampler. In the flowers, there's some purple. In the pansies, where's the pansies? There they are. Some purple that shows up in there. So I felt like purple would work, and it's a similar in value or similar darkness, if you will, to that 3371. So that's why I chose to switch my over 1 to this 103. Now I like the way it looks. The stitches are, let me get them up there, a little more plump than the others. But if you're standing back from it, nobody's gonna know that. I'm happy with it, and that's all that matters, right? Is that me as the stitcher who made this, the person whose wall it's gonna hang on, is happy with what I'm doing. And that's the reason we stitch, to bring ourselves joy and pleasure. And so that's my Bridget Power. So that brings me to those of you who have been on the journey of Bridget Power with me. You know, I've been trying to do some research about the origin of that sampler. I've talked before about how I think that Nicola Parkman particularly, but other designers who do reproductions of samplers and who include historical research that they've been able to find, I think they have spoiled us. They've spoiled me anyway, into thinking that anytime I might work on a reproduction, that I'm going to be able to know something about the person who stitched the original sampler. In this case, there's virtually no information about Bridget, who she was. The only facts we have are her name, her age, and the year it was stitched, because that is stitched into the chart. So it's Bridget Power 1840 down here in the bottom. It is extremely hard to see in this antique. So stitched in there is her name, that she did this when she was 13 years old in 1840. And for some reason, I've just been on kind of a quest to try and learn more about her. When I'm working on something, one of the reasons that I feel like I stay with or work on something mostly monogamously is that I feel like I'm in relationship to my project. And I'm certainly having somewhat of a relationship with Bridget because I've been so interested to try and find out who she was. Now, I have done quite a bit of research to figure this out. And by that, I mean, I have reached out to a lot of people to try and get some information. And so I've got a list I'm going to share, because some of you have been very generous in saying, have you thought about this? Have you reached out to this person? Have you, what about, you know, she might have been, lived in this country or whatever. And I do appreciate all of the input that you all have given me, much of which I had already thought about. So with that said, first of all, who would be the obvious person to reach out to but Gigi herself? I would have done that if I could have found a way to contact her. The only information on this version of the chart that I have was, it's copyrighted 2019 by Gigi R Designs. So there was no way to, no contact information there. I looked her up on the old Google, and all I could find were places that were selling her charts. I could not find a way to contact her. So the first person I reached out to was Jean Lee of The Attic, and they sell a lot of Gigi R charts there. Jean is a huge fan of Gigi R Designs. I figured she might have a way to contact her. That really didn't come up much in the email conversations I was having with Jean. She asked a few people if they had any information, and basically Jean didn't have any information to share that would enlighten us on who Bridget was. So that was Jean. I follow a few people on Instagram that I reached out to. Miriam, who is French and has the designs and charts under the name Couleur Tourterelle. A lot of her charts have similar Catholic symbolism in them. So I just asked Miriam if she would look at this image. Could she tell me if it looked French? Could she, just by looking at it, tell me maybe the origin of it? She wrote back to me very quickly, which I appreciated, and she said, no, not French. That even though it does share some similar characteristics with the altar particularly, and the Catholic symbols that are in this, she said it's definitely not French. And she couldn't really tell me. She didn't have an idea that she could share with me of, if not French, then what? And I appreciated that honesty, because I didn't want to be taken down or misled or taken down some road that wouldn't have led me anywhere. So that was Miriam. Then, because I had been in contact with Sabine of European Reproduction Samplers to get the Antoinette chart, I reached out to her. I said, hey, do you know anything about this? What does it look like to you? She couldn't tell me much either. She says it's definitely not German. Her expertise is in German samplers. And so she said, definitely not German. She shared it with someone else that she knew that had some expertise in samplers. Didn't have an idea of what it was. Now, Sabine had contact information for Gigi and told me she would write to Gigi. So far, Gigi had not responded to Sabine. So once again, we just were kind of at the end of the road with that contact. So then I was contacted on Facebook through the Antique Needleworkers Facebook group. I was contacted by a wonderful person named Ellen Chester. Now, I don't know Ellen personally. I've heard my friend Shelley of Antique Needleworkers talk about Ellen. Ellen does have a business called With My Needle. She does some reproduction samplers. She reached out to me and felt like with the name Bridget Power that this was Irish. And she gave me references for 3 different books on Irish samplers. One of which I had heard about Irish Quaker samplers. It was presented to us, the information from it and about it was presented to us at Sampler Symposium by Kathleen Littleton. And the other 2 books I ordered from my local library. We have an interlibrary loan service called WorldCat. I was able to get one of them, which I have right here. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. But so Ellen took me down the road a little bit about Irish samplers. And I think, just to interrupt my litany of who I've written to, I think we're going to go under the assumption that this is Irish. But there's no way to definitively know. But no, let me continue. So that was Ellen Chester. She mentioned, or I mentioned to her, that I was familiar with some of the Irish Quaker work because Kathleen Littleton had presented it. And so I wrote to Kathleen Littleton. She couldn't tell me whether or not this was Irish. So she, like many others, said, have you written to Gigi? Yes. Or no, but other people were on my behalf. So anyway, we get drawn back to Gigi. So that was Kathleen Littleton. Now, a friend of mine who moderates a Zoom group that I'm in called Stitch Across the Pond, Marie Gerstner, gave me contact information for 2 people. She suggested I reach out to Michelle of Mama Loves You GB and a woman named Linda Haddon, who is in the British Sampler Guild and very knowledgeable on British samplers. So I reached out to both of them. Michelle, I reached out to through Instagram. And Linda, I had an email address for. Michelle got back to me. Sorry, my dog, Archie, decided to bark. It's Saturday morning here in the town I live in, and there's some activity going on in the street outside the building, and sometimes he has to let me know about it. I think he's going to be done. Might have to pause. Nope, he's done. So anyway, I was at Michelle, Mama Loves You GB. She got back to me. She said, you know, maybe it's Irish. I can't tell you for sure. There were some characteristics about it that to her looked Welsh, and she's from Wales and knows a lot about those samplers, but she said, I don't know for sure. So I can't tell you with any certainty what it is. I'm sorry. So there was the end of my road with Michelle. And then Linda Haddon has been wonderful doing some research for me. First and foremost, though, she said, Jackie, I'm going to be honest with you. I do not know. I just don't know. And Linda, unbeknownst to me, also knew how to reach Gigi and wrote to Gigi. We have now heard back from Gigi. And unfortunately, there's no other information, nothing from Gigi that can shed light on this. She had nothing to add to the conversation other than what's on the sampler. Bridget Power, 1840. She was 13. That's it. And then lastly, Nicola Parkman. I wrote to her too. Now, I was pretty sure she would have some information to share just based on what we know of her and Hands Across the Sea samplers. And I met Nicola in January at the Attic at Sampler Symposium, and I was pretty sure she would write me back. And the one thing, I was talking to Celeste of Celeste Creates through Instagram, and she said, wow, you're so brave to reach out to all these people. One thing I have learned through the year and a half now that I've been stitching and doing, you know, here on FlossTube for the last month and a half, stitchers are so kind and so friendly and so helpful. I was pretty sure Nicola would be the same. And that's what I thought about all of these people I reached out to. It's not necessarily that I was brave. I'm on a mission to find out something. And what could they say? They could either ignore me, not respond, reply with a one-word sentence. Nobody did that. But, you know, I could either learn something or at least learn what it wasn't. And that's what most of this was about, learning what this sampler wasn't. And Nicola was the only one that gave me any information at all. She said, Jackie, I think that it's Irish. I can't tell you for certain it is, and I don't have any evidence that I can share with you that would tell me it is. I think it's Irish, though. And so we'll go with Irish, right? That's the bit of information that seems consistent with the name Bridget Power, and it's such an Irish name. So that then led me on a little journey. I hope you're willing to go with me on some more of this journey and just listen to me chat about what I've been learning. Now that I had kind of enough two clues, her name and it's probably Irish, to go on. I just thought, man, I want to learn now about what could make a 13-year-old girl in Ireland, or what was her circumstance that would make her want to do this. And kind of the reason I went down that journey is because at Sampler Symposium, Nicola Parkman was sharing with us two samplers, one that was Scottish, one that was Welsh. And she put them in the context of the history at the time. And I was there with my sister, and both of us afterwards said, wow, I wish I had learned history that way, by, you know, talking about something that we love and putting it then into what was happening in history at the time, because then you're far more apt to retain the information. So I just started doing some research about Ireland in the 1840s. And if Bridget was 13 in 1840, she was born around 1827, 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there. And I wanted to know, what was happening in Ireland at the time. And now from the perspective of someone in America, you research anything about Ireland in the 19th century, and what you come up with most was poverty and the potato famine. And I thought, wow, okay, this doesn't look like the work of somebody who was impoverished. So I had more questions. And more questions. Bridget, talk to me, girl. So then I reached out to my friend Sarah. So you might know her as Somi Sarah. And I know her also from that Zoom group across the pond, Stitch and Chat. And so we chatted. I said, Sarah, tell me, you're Irish. What do you know about your history? What was going on there in the early 1800s? And she said, you know, I'm not much of a student of history or samplers. I can't tell you a lot, Jackie. But she then shared my questions with a friend of hers. And that's where I got some really kind of interesting information, her friend Anne-Marie. So I printed out some of the email exchanges we were having and the information I was getting. And so I'm just going to read to you about Ireland in the 1840s. So outside of the cities of Dublin, Waterford, Cork, Galway, Derry, and Belfast, there was really no middle class as we would recognize it today. Families lived in small holdings that were multi-generational. Girls may have worked in domestic service and boys on the land, and the birth rate was high, but so was infant mortality, because as we know, the medical system or the medical advances that even were taking place in the 20th century, there just was not much in the 19th century. So unlike the UK, of which we were definitely part of at the time, the big houses were not fully occupied and therefore had only a skeleton staff that would upkeep them. Most of them were effectively hunting, shooting, and fishing lodges where the owners and their parties would come for the season. Mostly they brought their servants with them, using local people for the more menial jobs. There are 1,000 stories in Ireland of a local lass having her eye turned by the lord of the manor or his son, or a member of their party, and then maybe a child was born several months later that was never then recognized by the visiting family, but was sometimes taken into service by them and brought up with them. And that's very much a part of Irish folklore. So even before the Great Famine, emigration was seen as a way to advance. So the eldest child was often sent to the United States or the United Kingdom with the expectation that they could learn or earn enough money to send the fare home so that the next sibling could have this similar opportunity. And they were even known as the Bridgets in the United States because they were working in domestic service in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. This practice continued well into the 1900s. The Great Famine actually began in August of 1845 and lasted to 1852. And mostly that was due to, some of us know it as the potato famine. There was a huge blight that was killing the potatoes, which were one of the main food sources. So like most places at the time, wealth was concentrated in those urban areas, and they would have had a more traditional class structure there that we're still familiar with today. And outside of those areas, poverty was the predominant feature. Tenant farmers were working the land for absentee landlords, and what is often misunderstood that the landlords were themselves lords rather than dukes or princes, so they weren't that high up in the class system. So they were often struggling themselves to just maintain their lifestyle. Anne-Marie's gut instinct was that Bridget came probably from a poor background, because Bridget is not a name that was associated with wealth in Ireland. She probably would have lived in a stone cottage that she shared with her family and possibly her grandparents and the animals. Turf fires were their heating source. Oh my gosh, I love the smell of peat. I've been to Ireland twice, and I love the smell of peat. It's just an unforgettable smell once you've smelled it. So a family might have had chickens or eggs, possibly a cow for milk, and maybe some sheep. They would have been able to get wool to make clothing from the sheep. They grew some vegetables, principally the potato. Women wore a shawl that could be pulled over their head or wrapped around themselves for warmth. And the roles were very clearly defined. The men worked the land and the women took care of the children. Anne Marie's thoughts on this is that Bridget maybe emigrated somewhere else, and maybe because of her love of church and her longing for home, made this just to connect to home. I mean, obviously, it is a beautiful piece of devotional needlework that is a fact we can add to Bridget's name. So I'm not done researching. Linda Haddon said if she came across anything, she would definitely contact me. Nicholas said the same thing. But that does bring me one more thing, if you'll indulge me just a little bit more. I know I'm going on a lot about this, but it has meant a lot to me to do this work, and it just has helped bring me closer to the Bridget that I'm experiencing through this sampler, but to a time of history that I have come to find out is not really written much about, other than the poverty, and there's just not a lot that's known, or where I could find anything about who might have made this sampler, because this is not the sampler to me of somebody that's living in poverty. The supplies needed to make this would have required money, funds, or maybe it was a great gift from someone. I had one of my viewers of the last video said maybe she had a patroness of some sort who gave her the materials to make this. That's as good as answer as any, right? In this one book that I got that was recommended to me by Ellen Chester, this is called The Needlework Samplers of Northern Ireland, Patterns in History by Heather Crawford. This has brought me the closest to being able to say this was Irish. And it's just based on a couple of images, samples of Irish samplers that are in this book. So this book is about some samplers and information about stitching that's at the Ulster College of Art from the Fashion and Textiles area. And needlework was definitely part of what children learned in school. I've got some things flagged here. It was a great part of their learning, boys and girls, and they were taught from a very young age of what we would consider kindergarten. They were taught how to put a thimble on their fingers, how to thread their needle, how to make their letters, their numbers. And there was rigorous testing for the teachers who were going to teach needlework. It was a very important part of the skills that were necessary to be a contributing part of the family, and possibly then go into some form of working to bring income to your family. But there are some pictures in this book of some samplers that are in this collection. And I was thumbing through this. When I first got the book, I looked through it and I thought, oh, another dead end. But the other night I was thumbing through it again and my eyes landed on a sampler that was my first connection to Bridget. And I want to show it to you. Getting rid of a Post-it note here, right here. And I'm going to take it real close to the camera. Look at that floral border in the center. That floral border in the center here, kind of a meandering floral border. I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, there it is. There's a clue. Because, now let me show you Bridget. as I'm doing her. Look at the floral border. Right here at the top is meandering leaves and buds. Now you tell me that those aren't related. Gives me it gives me goosebumps, and it makes me slightly emotional to have searched and searched and to have something, a clue like this, that at least just says, yeah, Ireland. This is from the north of Ireland. This was made by Eliza Charles, age 11 years, in September of 1818. So anyway, there's that one. Then I came across another one that to me is at least reminiscent of Bridget. There's this one right here. I'm going to bring it closer. Look at the flower basket. Now that flower basket is not like Bridget, who made this very exuberant basket of flowers. But to me, there is a connection between that flower basket and the sort of organic kind of way that the flowers are depicted, with the flowers just kind of draping. It's more like, it is cross stitch, but it's a little more on the order of embroidery. And by that I mean, you know, it's a little more free flowing than some of the rigid type of flowers that were generally done in cross stitch. So that flower basket, to me, had the feeling of Bridget to it. This was made by Grace. I can't read, it's very ghosty here, and the attribution is not on this page, but it says Grace Ball, maybe, or the Ball School. And this is from 1841. So Bridget's 1840, this is 1841. And then I've got one more to share with you. And this one right here is by Eliza Byrne. No, actually, there was an attribution on that other one. Ellen Herman. And then maybe it was something Ball School. It was Grace Ball School, but Ellen Herman, the name is down there. I couldn't tell if that was the person who owned it or if that was the name, because that name is not in this. Oh, gosh, right there. Ellen Herman. Right there. Anyway, I want to show you this one more. Eliza Byrne. Again, take a look at the border on that. Similar kind of meandering flowers. This one is a little more organized than Bridget, but there's that same kind of two-tone leaves that are in this with some flowers. These flowers here remind me of some flowers here in the flower basket. Look at those right there. Those orangey ones. Anyway, I was starting to see similarities here. So I think we're on to something with this being Irish. Now this alphabet here, what I learned from Kathleen Littleton at Sampler Symposium, what we've talked about before, I talked about this a couple of videos ago. This was a Quaker alphabet. Common in Quaker samplers, the Benezet alphabet. So anyway, this book right here, oh, I stuck the interlibrary loan sticker, which tells you don't take this off, but I took it off. This book right here, Samplers of Northern Ireland. If you're at all interested in this kind of thing, there's some really interesting history of the education of needlework in schools at the time, and then some interesting samples of stitching. So I would recommend, if you're at all interested, I'm probably going to try and find a used copy of that so I can add it to my stitching library. So that's my journey so far with Bridget. Are you bored yet? I'm not. Anyway, Bridget. I learn something new every time, and what I've learned has opened up more questions, and history is just so interesting. It's how we got to where we are today. And anyway, so thank you for indulging me learning along with me, hearing about Bridget and what I'm finding about it. So the main things we know is she was 13 in 1840. She stitched a beautiful piece of devotional needlework. And, oh, one other thing I want to add to it. Someone mentioned to me, and I did know this, that the chart of Bridget Power was originally published by somebody. Their name was, what was it, A Woman's Worth? Did I write that down? I did not. Anyway, it was originally published by someone else. I was able to locate a copy of that chart on eBay. And there was a little bit of information that was included on that chart about the symbolism in this. However, it was all prefaced by, we assume. It was a supposition that based on the name and the symbols here, it was all a presumption of what this meant. And there was something in that description about the symbols of the altar, the monstrance, the grapes, and the 6 candles that are in this, that the supposition was that that depicted high mass. I still am under the impression that this might be about Bridget's confirmation, communion, First Communion, and confirmation. In my research, I have found out were at 2 different times in the early 1800s in Ireland. If anybody knows for sure, you can tell me, but I did some research on that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because, not necessarily the confirmation thing, but I work at a bank. I mentioned that in my last episode. But we have a customer who's a priest. He came in this week, and I was talking with one of my coworkers about my quest to learn more here about Bridget. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to ask him. I'm going to show him a picture of what I'm doing and see if he can tell me anything about the symbolism that would be more definite rather than a supposition or an assumption based on what somebody was looking at. And he said, of course, the altar cloth with the grapes and the fact that a monstrance was there. He said that, in his opinion, and again, he was just looking at it from a priest in 2024, said, you know, we use altar cloths like that all the time. There was nothing that he saw about it that indicated a particular type of mass or a particular special occasion. He said, wow, that's pretty. You did that? But anyway, so I did get to ask a priest about it. And so it's all speculation at this point. So again, we'll just go back to, it's a beautiful sampler made by a 13-year-old girl who obviously was very devoted to her faith. And she certainly knew how to make a thing of beauty that we now, make sure I'm showing you the front, yeah. That those of us in 2024, she's communicating with us through the ages from 1840 to 2024 and causing me anyway to go on a journey along with her. So that's Bridget. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about all of the supplies that I have beside me. I pull this tray over. like I said, I had people with questions. Show me your thread, show me your hoops. When I first came back to stitching, I took a lot of notes when I was watching other people's floss tubes. And when I would hear names of like needles commonly said, I would jot that down. Or when I would hear brands of charts or brands of hoops, I would jot that down. And I tried a lot of them before arriving at the supplies that I commonly use now. One of your biggest questions is, tell me about the magnifying lamp that you have. So this is my magnifying lamp. It is at 5 times magnification. It has different light. It has warm, medium, cool. I can take it bright, take it down. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to put a picture up here with information about that. I just did some research on that and I found that one on Amazon. I didn't have anybody recommend that particular lamp to me, so I took a chance, got it on Amazon. It was under $75 at the time. I just took a chance on that, and it has been a great lamp. So I will put links to that in the description box below, because a lot of you have wondered about that magnifying lamp. I would not be able to stitch 40 count, 46 count, 56 count without the aid of magnification. I'm severely nearsighted. I have worn glasses since the 5th grade. I wear contact lenses. I use readers to read with. And in order to see my stitching, I need both these and these and these. Now I have tried higher strength magnification. My usual readers that I use on an everyday basis are 2.5. I've tried bifocal contact lenses. I have bifocal glasses when I'm not wearing contacts. I've tried bifocal contact lenses and they just don't work for me. I've never been able to find some that are comfortable. And so I wear readers. These are just regular old, readers that you can buy. These happen to come from eBay. I like fun readers, so I have several different pairs, but I use 2.5. I've tried higher magnification to try without the magnifying lamp, and I didn't like that. My preference is just the combination of readers and the magnifier. So your mileage may vary, as they say. You have to find what works for you, and you have to be willing to experiment with what works, but that's the magnifying lamp. I do have another lamp that's right up here. Bend it down. This one, I believe Britech is the name of that one. And the reason I use the 2 lamps, I've been using 2 lamps when I work ever since I worked at Hallmark Cards. You can see my studio set up behind me. There are 2 lamps there. There and there. Those are knockoffs of the Luxo brand. They have a ring fluorescent and a daylight lamp in the center. And the reason I use 2 is so that you have light sources coming from both sides of you, so that neither one is casting shadows. You're getting much more light on whatever it is that you're working on, and you're not having shadows. So I'm using the light from the magnifier as well as this light when I work. And here where I'm sitting, I've got daylight coming in too. Although I mostly stitch at night after I get home from work. Of course, on the weekends, I've got the daylight as well. So as much light as possible is just, what works. So there's that. Some people wanted to see my floss. Get ready. Here's my overdyed floss. And that right now is my silks. This is like a necktie holder, I think. This normally hangs inside a closet, so it's not out being exposed to the light. The way my apartment is situated, I have two windows in here, one in my studio, and a couple in my bedroom that are all south facing. There's a lot of sunlight that comes in here. this stuff can fade pretty quickly. So I keep it in a closet. And so that's that. I have all the major ones. Sorry, I should have talked about that. I've got Weeks, Gentle Arts, Classic Colorworks, and I belong to Color and Cotton Thread Club, and so I've now got a collection of Color and Cotton floss as well. I store mine, let me hang that guy up, because it's heavy, and this is enough that I can show you. I store mine in color families. All the blues and the purples, in this case, together, the greens together, the blacks, whites together. Here are browns. Sorry, I'm not holding that up. Yellows, the reds. When I'm doing a color conversion or something, I'm not interested in the number or the name. I am more interested in the color and how it's working with colors around it. So I store mine that way in color families. Some people like to store their floss alphabetically. I have them organized in an app on my phone. XStitch, I believe, is the app that I have them in. So I have entered all the names of all of the flosses and my linens into that app. So I do know what I have, and I can look at that first and find out if I have the color. If I'm trying to kit up something, I can look at that first and know if I have the color, and then I can go to my floss rings and find it. I have DMC flosses as well, and those I keep on bobbins. You've seen me before if you've been watching me. I'm a bobbinator. It works for me. I'm not about to change that kind of thing now. It's not, for me, it's not worth it enough to change systems from hundreds of them on bobbins to switch them up. So I have them on bobbins and in just the simple plastic organizer boxes that you can find at Hobby Lobby or online, those things where you can look through. Now the way I store mine, let's see, I write the number on the side. Some people store them upright this way. I store mine sideways. So again, I can look at the colors. DMC flosses I do store in numerical order. I have not grouped them by colors because I'm looking for numbers on that. And in the past, I've told you that I have that DMC, got it right here. This DMC swatch book. Again, I'll recommend you get yourself one. Invaluable tool for checking what a color is. If you're looking at a chart and just the numbers, like, what's that color? You can look at this and find it. I also have my DMC numbers in that XStitch app, but for those, it's easy enough to go pull my bobbin boxes and see if I have it too. So that's how I do my floss storage. And when I'm kitting something up, I just put it on rings, whether it's the original cardboard drops that the floss comes on, or the bobbins, I put it on these binder rings. This works for me. We all have to figure out what works for ourselves. Now, the next thing I want to show you is, this is my little box of notions. It's just an old cigar box. I bought it because of the Indian. If you haven't noticed, you know, I've got a bison head there, and I've got other Native American things around me. I've told you before, you saw my bison picture last time. I've told you before I've done Native American beadwork, so I have a lot of that kind of stuff around me. I like it. I'm not Native, but at least not this time around. Anyway, this is my box of notions and all sorts of needles that I have tried. I tried Anchor, Pony, Bohin. That's another Bohin. John James, DMC. I had some peacemakers here too, because I know a lot of you like peacemakers. I think I gave those to my sister because she's a peacemaker fan. I don't have them here. And then for a while, I settled on this brand, Mary Arden. I heard a lot of people talking about the John James Petites. I found some. I paid more money than I probably should have for them, but I wanted to try them. I didn't like them. So those of you like John James Petites, again, we have to find what works for us. These worked for me for a long time, Mary Arden's. They have a really good sized eye in them, and they're a little shorter than some others. And I say they worked with me well for me for a while until I found these. And I haven't talked to you about them before, but because I was very protective about them. These I found on a little road trip, Stitchy road trip that I went on last fall. And these I found at Cecilia's Samplers in Branson, Missouri. And at that point, they said that these were just some, what they call new old stock that had been found, and they had access to them, so they were selling them. And when they were gone, they were gone. So when you hear that, when they're gone, you're kind of protective about this amazing thing that you have found. These are Colonial Petite needles. They're only about 1 inch long. Colonial tapestry needles. So these are size 28 because I use 40 count linen predominantly. And I do have some pony needles that are larger size if I'm going to use larger size fabric. But the reason I'm telling you now is apparently the Colonial company, I don't know anything about them. The popularity of these is such that they're making them again, and you can get them again. I saw them a couple months ago when I went up to Wisconsin, or went to Illinois to visit my sisters, and then went to Wisconsin. We were at Lynn's of Madison, and I bought these there. They had, this little vial had 20 of them in it. And asked them, where'd you get these? Because I was under the impression that they weren't making them anymore. She said, oh yeah, we can order them now. So I got these there. And then Karen Combs and I correspond periodically. I gave her some of these. They are also, you're gonna get some if you win that giveaway. They're in that needle book. There's half a dozen in there. But Karen found some on Etsy. And she purchased some, and I just did too. I've got 2 more vials of them that I got from an Etsy seller. So I'm pretty well supplied. I'm not going to run out of these anytime soon. But you can find these Colonial Petites now, and these are really the only ones that I use. I love them. I love them. And I'm even using them on my 56 count linen. Because I tried, Nicola Parkman recommended a John James tapestry point beading needle for 56 count. I had some of those from my beadwork days. I mistakenly got tapestry point once, and I had them, and I wasn't a fan. So I tried these with my 56 count, and it worked for me. It opens the holes well, and so that's what I'm using. So that is my needle tip that I'm sharing with you now. Those of you who work on higher count fabric and you haven't come across these yet, these are Colonial Petite tapestry point needles. These I got from an Etsy seller. Looking for I don't have the name right here. Excuse me. There are a couple of Etsy sellers who are selling them now. You can find them if you just go on to Etsy and try and find those. So the other thing in my little stitching box are a couple of, my little notions box, a couple of other things that I regularly use that people have asked me about. Magnetic cable ties. These I think are Smart and Cool brand. They're about 6 inches long, stretchy cable ties. Again, I'll put a picture up on these because I get them from Amazon. And you can get like, I don't know, a dozen maybe in a package. I use these all the time because I stitch on a hoop. I do not like drapey fabric that I have to figure my way around with my hand. So I roll my fabric up and put these around it. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen photographs of my setup and seen these attached to my my needlework, my hoop. They do double duty as being, because they're magnetic, as being my needle minder. I do have a couple of needle minders that I have over here on my lamp. It's just, yeah, it's sort of in the frame. Right here you can see there's a tomato. That actually was my mom's. My sisters and I split up my mom's threads and embroidery floss and stuff after she passed away. And that needle minder was something that was in my mom's needle book. And then I have another one here I'm pulling off. Get the things off it. That's a Scottish Terrier. You guys got to meet Archie a couple of episodes ago. That's a Scottish Terrier. That was a stick pin and I made that into a needle minder. But since I have these stuck to my hoop and my needlework, I don't really need a needle minder when I'm stitching. So these actually stick over here to my magnifying lamp. And so I keep a selection of needles over there on one. I have several needles here. I don't always have them threaded, but I've got them at the ready. So once I am putting one color of floss into it, I can keep that color of floss and I'll stick it. This chair I'm sitting in is from the 30s. It's got really wide arms. And so I can lay my bobbins right here next to me, my floss right here next to me. And it just sits on the arm of the chair. And because this is upholstered, I can stick a pin in it too. That might not be the best thing to do, but I do it. So I've got these, and these are my counting pins. I think these are quilt pins. Again, they were from my mom's stash. So why not use them? So these are my counting pins. They can stick to my needle minders over here or stick in my chair. The other thing that I always have over here with me is this thing. It's called a star detailer. Oh, the camera's focusing on me. But that's a star detailer. It has this little wire. Yeah, very hard to see because it's so fine. That is twisted at the end. And what this helps you with is if you're stitching and you're playing thread chicken with your floss, trying to get the end of a row or whatever, and you've got just a teeny bit of floss left and you don't quite have enough to thread under your stitches at the back of your work, this guy you can push. It's flexible because of that, the way that that's made. You can push it under the back of your stitches and put the tail of your floss into this opening and pull it back through your stitches so you can then anchor your tail of floss underneath your stitches so that those can stay secure. So I keep that over here on one of my needle minders too. So those are things that I always use. Oops, I found a needle there. And then the other thing that I routinely use and people have noticed is hair clips. Now these are not something I need. My sister who lives over by St. Louis and stitches a lot recommended these to me. These are also come in handy along with the magnetic cable ties for helping wrangle my excess linen. And sometimes I use these two things in combination. So I kind of twist up my linen and kind of snug it up around my hoop and I might clip some bulk with these hair clips, and then I will augment that with the cable ties. And these I just get off of Amazon. These are like 2 inches long. These are the most effective for me. I've got a couple of bigger ones. I don't like, smaller ones never worked. These are Goody brand. They're the best ones I found. I tried an off-brand once. Their edges were really sharp, and they the spring came unsprung really quickly. So these Goody brand ones are the ones I use. I just get those off Amazon too. And then, what else is in my little box? A colored pencil for marking on a chart. I am old school and use paper charts. I usually will make a working copy of my chart so I can mark on it. I can cut it apart or tape it together, because if you're working on a chart that has multiple pages, I like to sometimes work across a row that's not always included on one page, so I will tape pages together and fold them up and mark on them. I'm going to show you the Bridget Power chart, the area I'm working on right now. You won't be able to see a dang thing about the detail of the chart from this, so I feel safe sharing it with you. But here it is. You can see I'm working on, that's the archway of, and the curtain there. But you can see how I'm marking off where I'm working. I have 3 colors of highlighters right now. I've got a blue one too, but these are the 3 I'm using. And I'm just marking my chart. And good old clothespins. We're very low tech here. Clothespins, because this, if I unfold it, is much larger. It's a whole section of that chart that I've taped together, and I can just, here's some that I've done, and I can just fold it up and clip it in the area that I'm working on. So yeah, low tech, old school, that's what I'm doing. And scissors are the last thing I want to show you, because scissors are something people are very passionate about. 3 pairs that I have around. I only have, the one I wanted to show you I don't have here. I have a handmade pair by the Wright Company in England. I don't have them with me. They're on my art table, I know. Beautiful pair of embroidery scissors that were handmade. I thought I would end up using those, but I find them to be a little too heavy. I do have a beautiful pair of stork scissors. You see these a lot in my photography because they're beautiful. I don't use them for stitching very much. Sometimes I do. But the reason I don't use them for stitching very much is because I have one favorite pair, and that is these. These are some Bohin. This is the case they came in. It doesn't really tell you anything about the particular pair. These are, I think they're called the Bohin Soft Touch. I'll put a link to these below too. They have a slight bit of almost like a rubbery coating around the red part of the handles, and they feel good. They are soft to the touch. But when you put them down, because of that little bit of rubber, it's probably silicone, they don't slide around, which is really nice if you're working on probably a hard surface or a tray, or if you have your supplies contained on a tray. These wouldn't slide around a lot. And they're just like 3.5 inches long. The blade itself, hopefully you can see, it's very sharp point. These are, and they're very lightweight. These are my favorite Stitchy scissors. Bohin Soft Touch. And I have one other teeny weeny pair. I got these for traveling because, you know, you never know what the TSA people are gonna approve of and disapprove of. So these are just a tiny pair. They have a blunt end, and I don't use them in my day-to-day stitching, but they're in my travel stitching kit. These are my favorites. Bohins there. And again, trial and error is what I came to for that. Let me see if there's anything else. And the other thing I have that made its way into my Stitchy box from my art studio is this thing. It looks like silly putty. It's not. It's what's called a kneaded eraser. It's obviously malleable. And it comes in a little rectangular shape about a 1/4 inch thick when you buy it. It's cellophane wrapped. But what I use it for in my stitching world, the reason it's in my Stitchy box, is because sometimes when you have to frog, you guys never have to do that, right? I never do. Not. Every now and then you've got to frog threads. And sometimes a little bit of fuzz from the floss gets a little bit clogged up or stays in some of your linen threads or your Aida threads. And I know some people use like a brush that's sort of like a mascara brush that's never been in mascara before. You can get that brush. I've never had one of those. I just started using this, and it works for that because you can just, if this were the linen, you just rub it. It's soft. As I said, it's stretchy, it's soft. It has a very slight amount of tackiness to it. It's not sticky, it's just tacky. And so you just rub that across your fabric and it will pick up those little fuzzy bits of your floss. So that's why a kneaded eraser is part of my Stitchy box. And I've got other kneaded erasers that stay in on my table over there. I'm looking through if I have anything else in here I'm going to share with you. So that's my tray of Stitchy tools. I'm going to set this down on the floor. Excuse me. I don't have a lot of room here for stuff. I had to move a chair over, as you saw, with all of my stuff. So I want to, and hoops. I've tried a lot of them. Quickly, I'll show you hoops. Look at all these I've tried. Wooden ones, type with the screws. The expensive type with the screws. And I've gotten away from using wooden hoops because I landed on Nurge hoops. I bought a set, of which this one right here is the biggest one. I bought a set. They come in different sizes. At first it was a set of 3, that big one and these 2, and now they've added a tiny one to it. This might be good if you're just working on a small, because it's really only about 3 to 4 inches at the most by maybe it's 3 by 4. It's small. I haven't found use for this yet. That doesn't mean there won't be. These are the 2 most commonly used sizes. This is my most commonly used size. These are numbered. They have millimeters on them too. This one is before this one was manufactured. I think this is new. This one was the smallest one. This is a number 1, this guy. This is the number 2. It says it's 165 millimeters by 145. So 165 by 145. This is the number 2. This is the one I use almost all the time. I like the tension that it gives me. It's just become my friend. You know, we become, again, we have a relationship with what we're doing, with our tools. That's why they become our favorites. This size right here is the number 3. It's 195 millimeters by 220 millimeters. I use this one sometimes, and I have been using it with Bridget sometimes, because now that I've got the over 1 stitching in there, even though I don't mind my hoop going over my other stitches, that will come out. I'm going to tell you, take it from me. If your stitches get a little crushed and have hoop marks, they'll come out when you finish your work, when you lay it down and steam it a little bit and iron it. Those stitches will plump up. So don't worry about hoop marks. However, I've never put a hoop on silk yet. I guess I have on Antoinette a little bit. But when I'm working on this archway and working in these curtains, I wanted to be able to have the whole width of that within my hoop. And I do have an antique oval one that I can get around that. I'm having a little tension problems with that antique one. I need to add, I'm starting to add a little washi tape based on the advice of the girls from Cross Stitch the Globe. They have great videos that are like almost tutorials and help educate you on cross stitch tools. Other things as well, they do a traditional floss tube about what they're doing, but they've got like FlossTube University, they call it, and they talk about different tools. Right now they're talking about floss storage options. And they've talked about, one of them has a penchant for antique hoops. And so I have two, a round one and an oval one, antique, that I'm trying to come up with the right tension. And based on the advice of one of the Cross Stitch the Globe girls, I'm using a little bit of washi tape around the inner ring of the hoop, and I haven't arrived yet on optimal tension. Until I do, I'm using my Nurge hoops, and this one, as you can see, I can get the width of this archway in there. So I'm using this for this bigger one for things like that. Mostly I use the number 2. This is my hoop of choice. I know some people are two-handed, or you stitch in hand. I haven't tried it yet. I like the tension that a hoop gives me. I like tight tension, so I'm probably not going to be an in-hand stitcher anytime soon. And pretty much, there you have it. Those are my most frequently used tools and the ones that some of you have been asking about. I think it's good to share that kind of stuff. What works for us, what we've experimented with. Maybe most of these things, maybe you have experimented with, or maybe you stitch with a wooden hoop and you've seen the plastic Nurge ones and you've wondered about them, but not known if they were worth your investment. We learn. You can, and we do learn from each other's experience. So those are just my experience, and your mileage may vary. So that's that. So I have just a little bit more to share. I know we're getting long here, as I tend to go on. I want to go through, I had my first Stitchy kindness that I want to share. I had talked about in FlossTube number 3 in my last one, that I had one of the Brenda Gervais Abecedarian charts, the number 4 chart, and I had talked about someday maybe wanting to make those and alter those to focus on Frida Kahlo. And yeah, I heard you guys, and I thought about it, of course, after I hit the stop recording. Selma Hayek was the actress who starred in that movie. Wonderful movie about the life of Frida Kahlo. But I had 2 different people reach out to me and offer me their charts. They had already stitched these, and so one of them, I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yes, I would love to share those with you. I've already done them. They're just on my shelf. So thank you. You know who you are, who mailed these to me. Thank you very much for those." A little bit of stash enhancement. I'll go through this relatively quickly. My friend Gretchen, who has the shop Florilegium, she had a Treenway silk trunk show, and she let me have a few to play with. So I brought home a couple of reds and this cream colored one. And I haven't played with them yet to see. These are stranded ones, so I can separate the strands just like you would a stranded silk like NPI or is it the Auvera-Soie d'Alger, I believe, that is stranded also. But I do have something I'm going to try that cream color on for sure. And I had talked about waiting for some blue linen that I got on a stash on Load Site, and I've got that. I got 3 different pieces. Here they are. A kind of a light we'll say that's medium, and a very dark. They are in order here. The light one is called Polar Bear by Dames of the Needle. It's similar to, the closest I could get to that I had was DMC 928, but it's more like 828. I just didn't have that. So that's Dames of the Needle Polar Bear. It's a beautiful light blue with some modeling. This next one is Fiber on a Whim Sapphire. That is gorgeous. Gorgeous. That I pulled out, I have just some notes stuck on here. Fiber on a Whim. These are all 40 count, by the way. This is a 1/4 yard. This is an old, from a DMC. It's 336. It looks more green in this light. It is slightly more green. And then I wrote down DMC 803. So it's somewhere between those two, but oh my, gorgeous. I love that. I have plans for that. And then this one right here, this darkest one, is Atomic Ranch, 40 count, Christmas Night. It is a very deep, I've got nice light from this window, but don't let that fool you, because this is a really, really deep midnight blue. And I pulled DMC 312, which it's not like, but I wrote down as like DMC 311. So that's 312. So DMC 311 is darker and kind of close to this Christmas Night. And the reason I'm going to focus on that a minute, I showed you in my haul from Country Sampler that I got, actually these were from Beautiful Sip and Stitchery. I got these two Shakespeare's Peddler charts. And there's some cream silk. Wouldn't those, or one of them, that one probably, look beautiful on that with that? I'm thinking that's what I'm going to do. I like red. Red works well in my apartment with, I have brown walls all throughout this apartment. Red really is a wonderful accent color. It's not my favorite color though. I mean, yeah, red silk is gorgeous. Red is a great accent color, but I think I'm going to try stitching this on that dark blue and just see what happens with that. I'm excited about that. And then this sapphire, last time I talked about the stitch along that Somi Sarah and I are going to do with Barbara Anna 4 Seasons chart. And I think I might use that for one of the backgrounds. So, and then the other one last thing I got is this, the blue flower in Praise of Pollinators. I've seen so many people working on this, and I believe it's a gal named Lala D Stitches who is leading a stitch along right now with this. But I just had to get it. I don't know when I will do that, but it just really, really appealed to me. So I think that's all I want to show you right now. I'll talk again in future about the stitch along. We've talked about that before. That's not happening until December, so we'll bring that up again. I want to switch now to a little bit of a moment of meditation. It's more than a moment, probably a couple of minutes here. So as I said, I'm going to read you something that was a journal entry from the Trappist monk Thomas Merton. I hope you'll stay and listen. I think there's something to be received from it, no matter what you believe, what you don't believe, if you like meditation, if you don't. I'm not going to lead a guided meditation today, but I find when I find something inspiring to read and it makes me think and changes the way I think, as this piece of writing did, I like to share that. So that's why I want to share it with you today. And I first heard it, I've long been kind of a student, if you will, of a spiritual teacher named Carolyn Myss. She's a PhD scholar on Catholic mysticism and other religious and wisdom traditions. But I've been following her work and reading her work for a very long time, before she was even a best-selling author. But I think it might have been a TED Talk of hers is where I first heard her share this piece of writing by Thomas Merton. And I'm going to read it to you as she shares it, because it had a profound impact on her, and her sharing of it had a profound impact on me. And so I hope that as I share it with you, whether profound as you're feeling about it or not, I hope it will just make you pause and think. And so this is from the Trappist monk Thomas Merton. He lived as a hermit for many, many years in Kentucky. And Gethsemane actually was the name. I think that might just been the name of his hermitage. But he was writing in his journal, was describing a hot day in June, actually. It was a very hot day. And he was describing nature. And again, these are the words of Carolyn Myss reading this journal entry. So he was describing how the hot wind was blowing across the fields and causing the flowers to lean over. And he said he'd been walking up the hill that day. And it was hard for him because he was getting older and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. And he said to himself, I'm getting older. He just made note of that. I'm getting older. And he described how the sun was hitting the side of the mountain. At the time of day, it was kind of a purplish red hue. But he ended that with just realizing that everything around him, he saw a cow just reclining on the ground, munching away in the shade of a tree, and the daylilies drooping a little bit, the breeze, as I said. He just realized how beautiful just that moment in time was. And he just had this realization that this day will never come again. This day will never come again. And so Carolyn Myss, who I was listening to recount this story, just went on to share how deeply that sentence, this day will never come again, impacted her. And as I heard her sharing that, it really landed deeply within me. It's a simple sentence. This day will never come again. But if you think about it, it's deep. After I heard that day, I believe that very same evening, I was having dinner with some friends that I worked with many years ago at Hallmark. And we would get together for each other's birthdays. So we might only see each other like 4 times a year. But I realized how very special it was that we were all able to sit around a table with each other. And that moment, that time that we had together was never going to come again. One of those friends passed away last year. So there's even more profound feeling about that idea that this day will never come again. The time I'm sharing with you, it's never going to come again just this way. This day that I'm having right now, the sun, 27th of July, 2024. it's never going to come again. So with that, thank you. Thank you to those of you who comment, who hit the thumbs up button, who have decided to subscribe to this channel because there's something here that you're getting that means something to you. Thank you, because this day will never come again. Thank you so much for spending it with me this time. Thank you. And I'll see you again. Pretty sure I will. Bye-bye.